when we're painting with realistic flowers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about something called value. And I was just talking about it in regards to what Debbie had. And I've created this, and I wanted to talk about contrast and value and intensity. And these are a few things that you're all not familiar with. And yes, I'm going to get to teaching you how to paint the folds, I promise. But what you'll see is in the mid-range, you can see my name where it started out where it's all white and then it's all dark. Notice how there's more contrast in the mid-range. And so there's more interest in the mid-range. And that's very important to remember when you're painting realistically. Also, there are 9 numbers here. This is the Munsell numbering system, and it was Munsell was the one who created this way of referring to values. So unfortunately, when it printed out, it did not print very well because you cannot see the subtleties here very well. But you often, when you hear oil painters talk, they talk about a mid-tone, and many times they refer to a number 5 mid-tone. This is what they're talking about. Now, what I like to do is when I'm painting realistically, I like to look at a photo of whatever I'm going to be painting. Now, obviously, this part and this part were painted extremely differently. I will tell you that even though this is very high key, meaning it's painted with mostly higher values, there are probably 7 values on here by the time you're done. And same with, yes, ma'am.
I'm really sorry to bother you, but did you want the captions on?
Oh, no. Would you like to turn those off for me? Or can you turn
Can I do that?
I don't know. If not, I'll go do it.
I'll try.
But anyway, I'll continue. And if I have to take a break, then I will just go really quick and turn off the captioning. For this class, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference, Debbie. Okay, but anyway, as I was saying, is there's at least 7 values here and at least 7 values here. I was taught it takes 5 values to create form. And that's why I wanted Debbie Mishima to show you that even though hers is whimsical, she's trying to create form and she uses 5 values. But is it realistically done? No. And the reason why is because of where she places her shades and highlights. And she's not looking at anything and she's not trying to record what she sees. Here, when I painted this realistic flower, I was recording what I was seeing. I was making visual observations. So the first thing I want to say is that when I go into the color, all of the color has values too. And you can see I created a scale of 9 values here. And I'm not sure if you can see just a little bit of difference, the subtlety here. This is just what's called a tint. So as you go down, I would choose what my mid-tone would be. So going back here, looking at this, now this is much warmer, I can see, but let me fold this over even. Why am I talking about this is because so many of you are like me and you're a bottle baby and you have not learned this. And that's why I'm emphasizing this today. So what I'm doing is I'm looking to see how light or dark the values are. And you can see that most of the ranges are all in this range here. And so what I would do is I would come in then and I would choose a color that is closest to begin. Obviously, the bottom half would be painted much darker. And I don't know if you can tell, but as far as temperature goes of a color, this is a much warmer red tone than what's in here. This is almost leaning to the red violet. Okay, so this is the actual value scale that I created for this particular design. And I did paint this in oils, but I'm going to show you how to paint it with acrylics today. the first thing I do is I want to make sure that my colors lay down. And a lot of people will say it's impossible to paint realism with acrylic, bottled acrylic paints, but especially acrylic paints. And I disagree, but we are at a disadvantage. And so what I'm going to do is show you kind of what I do. So when I begin, I start laying out colors to see what lines up fairly similar to what's on my value chart here. So you can see that pretty much matches, well, I've got a cast shadow now from the bottles, but it matches the values that are going on down here. And then what I'll do is I'll decide what my midtone is. And in this case, my midtone was Poodle Skirt Pink. Okay. So look what happened then when I put out these colors. Here's my Poodle Skirt Pink. Don't ask me to say that 10 times fast. And then this was the next color that I chose, which was Cotton Candy. Can you see how warm that is? That is a real temperature change. And I don't know how well that will lay down because it's as you create realism, there are some rules. And I will tell you, looking at this, as you get darker, you have to be darker and you have to be cooler. As you get warmer, you have to be lighter and you have to be warmer. And that's with any color you're working with. So as you get lighter, you have to remember you're going closer to the sun. So we're going to add some warmth into that. And as you get darker, you're going away from the sun. And so it's going to cool off a little bit. Now, while I want to use Poodle Skirt Pink and get a little bit warmer, this color is way too warm. It's in the orange family. I want it to be more into a red-orange family. And then this is the pink chiffon. And I like pink chiffon a lot. And that may work well for the highlight. But my concern right now is there's not a lot of pigment in there at all. It might look too chalky. So when you look at something and you're painting it and you go, oh my goodness, that's too chalky. Or you say, oh, that's too muddy. Going back to our value chart, when something is too muddy, that means you've done a value jump. And what does that mean? Let's say we're starting with a number 5 value. Rather than shading it with a number 4 or even a number 3, some people I see a lot when they're doing stylized painting. It's more whimsical realism. They'll jump all the way into a number 2 value. And that's why it might look a little bit muddy. A lot of times teachers who have you do that will use a mop to clean it up. And that way you kind of get almost a blended look between them. And it's a way that they've used to paint faster. But again, it's a stylized flower or a stylized item that they're painting, and it's not realistic. And it's the same thing when you go too light, too fast. It will become chalky. So if it's muddy, you've gotten too dark too quickly, you've done a value jump. If it's chalky, you've gotten too light too quick. And again, you've done a value jump. So a lot of times I will talk about value jumping a lot. And that's what I mean. So I have some other flowers here. And sorry, I need to turn. And I hope for those of you who are messaging me when I'm live, if you can't find me, I'm sorry. I can't answer your messages when I'm live. I want you to look at this flower really quick. This has a lot of folds, a lot of ripples in it. This is mostly a high key painting, but look at all the values you have into it. It's almost like a stair step. You've got a light value. You have a secondary light value and a midtone. You have shades, and it keeps going. And there are 7 values here, but notice how the darker darks are just in little tiny areas. And that's because when you make visual observations, that's what you see. this particular flower, and that is not showing up well on the camera at all. It's much lighter, but the original is under glass, and so I knew that would just shine all over the place. This has a lot of color surprises in it. But what I wanted to show you too is how when it's rolling, how it softly comes out. I'm not just floating a highlight along the edge and shading in here. We have lots of values going on, and that's one of the problems with painting realistic flowers is within one petal, there's so many different opportunities to have different shapes within it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Also, when I talk about shapes, most of the shapes that you're going to see in a flower is going to be a cylinder or a cone. And the ripples are pretty much cones. And so look at all the values that you have to create a cone. And that's one of the problems in painting roses or any other real ripply flower like this. So this is a little cone shape here. Over here, we have a cylinder. If you cannot see these shapes, it's okay. Because when I first started painting realistic flowers and I started learning about seeing all these different shapes, I was like, what? What are you talking about? But there are four shapes. There's the cone, there's the cylinder, there's the sphere, and there's a cube. Many times flowers will have flat planes, but you'll have combinations mostly of cylinders. As this is rolling around, it would be like if I were to chip this on the cylinder on the side here, and this is rolling back. And this whole petal here, I created very much like I would a cylinder. So I have my highlights here, then I have a mid-tone, and it's getting a little bit darker. And that's what's making it round. It doesn't look flat. If I were to just highlight on the outside and shade here, you'd have a little bit of that, but you would be missing so much of the delicate intricacies of what you see in a realistic flower. This particular fold here, that is a cylinder. And so many times people will want to just highlight the edge and then shade the back half. But the truth of the matter is, look how light that is. So that is a little bit darker than here, but it is rolling. And I'm using all of these values very carefully. Overall, this is a very, very light area here, but there's enough value tucked in where it's actually going to make these folds. This over here it's like a little backwards S. And so it's a combination of cones and cylinders. And so it helps to learn to, what I like to do is I like to first start with bigger things, and still lifes are a lot easier to start with. So like looking at a bottle, that is a cylinder, and that's very obvious. But when you're looking at all of these little intricacies within the flower, that's a little bit more difficult to do. So let's get back to what colors we're going to be using. So as I said, here I have all these colors I made up, or I put out in the bottles. And I'm going to turn this around so this color here is laying down really well there, but this is much warmer. This is much too orange, as I discussed. And then I have my mid-tone color. What I prefer to do then is take, and this, I'm going to use the M word. I'm going to mix these two colors together. So I've decided that I like pink chiffon, and my base coat color was poodle skirt pink. So I'm going to take my cotton candy and put it off to the side, because even though it looks like it would lay down beautifully between them, it was much too warm. And so often you say to me, well, how do you know what colors to choose, Debbie? Well, what I do is I look for the mid-tone. So in this flower here, I looked for what I felt would be a mid-tone color, and that's where I began. And then I'd move up by getting lighter and warmer, and I'm gonna get darker by and create my shades by getting darker and cooler. So now another color that I thought might work really well. So I've got my pink chiffon and my poodle skirt pink. I'm going to put those out to the side. Another color that I thought would work really well would be petal pink. And when I put that down, because, you know, it pretty much looks like it's a little bit different, it was way too cool. So I've got to put that to the side too, because that's just not going to work. And so then I can continue down, and I'm looking at this color, and this would be the low dark, and this is boysenberry pink, and I don't know if this is still available or not. I also have, for my high dark, I have bubblegum pink. So my mid-tone is poodle skirt pink. My first highlight color, or the low light, I'm going to make a mixture of these two, and then my light will just simply be the pink chiffon. I think I'm going to be able to get away with shading. My first shade, or my high dark, will be bubblegum pink. And I'm trying to turn these up so you can see them. I hope this is making sense to all of you. But then I have this huge jump. If I were to come in then after this, this would be a value jump, because you see I'm here and I'm jumping all the way over here. So what I'm going to do is mix these two colors as my fifth value. And then I do glazing and other things. But what I'm doing today is I'm just trying to show you the difference. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to mix these colors. Let's talk a little bit about how to create ruffles and how to see them. You know, what is it that you're looking for in a flower, and that would cause you to know that that should be the area that raises up. And hang on, get enough values out here so we can start painting. So let's say that this is a ruffle edge of a petal flower. Can you all see that? Debbie, can you see that light line?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I have a question for you. What part of this would be the area that's highlighted?
You're asking
not
me?
necessarily you, Debbie, but to all of them there out in creative innovations. What part would be highlighted? And what part would create the ripple? Would it be the part that's coming out, or would it be the part that's going in? Well, as it comes up and it's closer to the light source, it's the areas that go in and everybody thinks it should be reversed. This is the areas that would be highlighted. Let's see if I can fill this in really quick. And they're going to create, see how they're somewhat of a triangle? We would never make them the same shape, just in the same length and everything. This is just so you understand what I'm saying. Right here, these are cones, and that's pretty much what a ruffle is. So when I'm saying, when you're painting, hang on, I lost one of my pieces of paper. I want to go back and find my cone. Here it is. Okay. When you're painting these, you're painting a cone. Okay, and that's what I'm saying right here. It's somewhat of a triangular shape. It's generally rounded. In this case, it's coming out like that. In here, it would be all shaded right here. The rest of it, chances are it's got some other things going on, and we won't get into that. I just wanted to talk briefly about that. So let me get some colors going here. And when I mix colors, like I said, I was going to mix poodle skirt pink and cotton candy together. I want to make sure that I'm using equal amounts. So now I want to show you what I have. This lays down so nicely. There's one value in between them. This is my mid-tone color. And this is cotton candy over here. Excuse me, that is pink chiffon, I'm sorry. And this is a combination of poodle skirt pink and pink chiffon. Then as I go darker, I'm going to put bubblegum pink. Oops. I'm sorry, I already had that one up. Here is that's my poodle skirt pink, I'm sorry. So I have mixed the wrong colors here. This is good. You can see how I lay them out. That was way too much. And I could have had these mixed ahead of time, but I wanted to show you too how I mix them and how I plan things out. So this is going to be a lot lighter. And so now when I need to bring I'll just put my poodle skirt pink right here. And I want to see if I can visually see the difference between these two. And I think now what I need to do is add just a little bit more of the pink chiffon into this, because I don't think it has enough difference. There's not a great enough value. And this is what I do when I'm trying to decide what I'm painting. Okay, I like that much better because now I see how it just steps right down, and then the shade color will be the bubblegum pink. And I also said with the bubblegum pink, I would add boysenberry and make that 50-50. And I can pretty much judge. These are really thick. I can pretty much judge when after I'm done mixing and I'm looking on my palette whether or not it's going to lay down right or not. I think I need a fresher bottle of boysenberry pink. Okay, that was a little bit light. Add a little bit more to it. And what I always try to do, especially when I'm teaching, I try to make it where it's equal amounts of something. Add a little bit of water to that because that is way too thick. Okay, so this is a very high key painting. And so these do not seem like they're going to be probably a big enough value change for all of you. But if I go back to my chart, I think what we're going to see is that this is going to lay down really well there. Once it dries, this is laying down really well here. We'll go into our mid-tone. And again, all of these have to dry. And once they dry, they will all look great. Oh, you couldn't see that, I'm sorry. Okay, so those are the colors I'm going to use. Now let's talk about this. We're going to go in here and all these, remember how I said it's all the areas that go up. So I'm going to have little area here and then a little teeny area there. So all these edges here that have all these little ins and outs, they're going
It's actually really hard to see the white lines. People are commenting that the white lines are really,
okay.
it's hard to see.
It's because it's a soapstone.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. I can see it because I'm looking at the computer, but on the iPad, no, it's really not that good.
Okay. You can see those there.
That's a bit better. Yeah.
Okay. So then we have this little real long area here, and it's coming in, but it's kind of coming into here. This is going to be a cylinder. So we're going to address this a little bit differently. Now, there are so many different ways that you can approach this. I like to put in my highlights with dry brushing because to me, it's the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to go into my low light or my first highlight, and we'll see how much this shows. I'm going to come down and I'm going to go right in the middle and bring this down. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. And unfortunately, I used graphite, so it's going to pick up a little bit in here. This also is a huge cylinder. So I'm going to come over here. I should have used my kneaded eraser. I'm sorry. And I'm carrying it all. But notice how it's somewhat of a cone. And then it comes over here and it's a little bit more narrow. And so then this is like the cylinder part. And then this becomes more of a cone because it's wider here than it is there. And if you don't see that, that's fine. Let's see if I can cover up some of that graphite right there.
What kind of brush are you using, Debbie?
Oh, this is one of my dry brushing brushes. I have a set. It's called the Creative Blending Set. It's by Silver Brush. And the brush guys do carry these. If it says that they're out on their website, call them. Because a lot of times they're getting them in. I prefer this is a dome, pointed dome brush. I prefer these to dry brush with because I can go right up to the edge and pull shades at the same time too. If I were doing a big cylinder, I would be able to go right up to an edge. And yeah, for here, I will probably float. I will float. But if I was doing a pair and wanted to do the first shade and bring it out really far, and I knew my students would have a hard time walking out a float, that's where I would dry brush it. And I would do the same thing with the highlight because generally the highlight would be a circular form. And that's what I love. You can go in and reinforce these multiple times. And I just can't get rid of the graphite, so that's okay. And again, I am using, this is all that first color, which I mixed, and it was the pink chiffon and poodle skirt pink.
Now, this isn't mixed with water either, is it? It's just a straight paint?
No, because I am, with my dry brushing technique, my brush is completely dry. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I'm doing though, I have a video on how to dry brush. And I hope you've gone to my YouTube channel to see how to do that. What I do is I load my brush with paint and then I take it out on my paper towel. And that's what I'm doing. And I go into, whoop, and because I was talking, I picked up some full strength paint. But what I wanted to show you is this highlight. These are all little highlights. Notice the variation in them. Like I have one long here, one short there, and unfortunately they're all blended with graphite because I didn't use my kneaded eraser. That's why you need a kneaded eraser. Okay. And the rest of them would pretty much be the same. So what I want to do then is I'm going to come in with my first shade color. And I'm going to float that in. Now, what do I use to float? If I'm doing really tight areas, I would use an angle brush. But for the most part, I like a nice flat brush. I prefer a, well, with this, because I've got lots of small areas, I will use a 1/2-inch brush. And you need to make sure you have very good brushes when you're painting realistically. Okay, so we're going to go into our first shade, or our high dark. And I'm going to come in. Now let's see how this shows up. This may not show very well because, again, it has to dry. The disadvantage you have when you're using values that are so close with acrylics is the fact that you have to wait for it to dry to determine whether or not you like that value and whether or not it lays down properly. Okay, and I'm going to pull some nice dark behind here. But you can see how subtle that is, but yet you can see that it's shaded. Now I'm going to take that same color and I'm going to shade back over here. I also have some videos on how to float if you don't know how to float. And notice how I pity-pat pull my floats. It's because the reason I started doing that is because I can then control where I'm placing the value. What I don't want is I don't want my highlight to touch the shade color. We need the mid-tone to be in between. If your highlight is touching your shade, it's like you're missing a stair when you're going up and down the stairs and you could fall. Well, you won't create form very well. So if I was creating something else, like I taught a class on Christmas bells, I may not use the same kind of subtle value change. This is because this is a flower, and flowers need to be treated very, very, very delicately. Now that line's going to be in my way the whole time I'm showing you this. But as I'm floating there, believe it or not, I'm going to come in and I'm going to roll that back, because that's a cylinder. So it was like a back-to-back shade right there. I put one down and then I came in. And so what you're going to say is, well, then Debbie, basically you wouldn't be creating any form. And that's where I have to say you have to be a little bit patient as you're painting realistically and know where you're going. Okay, so now, well, I just kind of did my own thing here. I'm going to go back into my highlight color. And along here, I'm going to show you now how I got to turn it. I'm going to just highlight this edge just a little bit. And I'm going to look for those areas that go in and just kind of, I'm doing what's called a bird float. And I'm going to go into a little bit lighter color. I'm going to go into the pink chiffon and show you what a bird float is. Basically, when it goes in like that, basically you start and you float and you go like that, and you need to make sure that it's soft. And then if you need to, you can always bring it down a little bit. And that's what I just did right here. Only look how small that area is. Such little teeny areas I'm floating. And then I'm going to lift up this side over here. And we'll lift up this over here. So this was left mid-tone. All of this is mid-tone. All of this is mid-tone. I might want to just add just maybe a few little touchdowns right there to just give it a little bit of sparkle. Now let's go back over and talk about what's going to go on in between here. Well, we need to bring some darkness down here. So you can dry brush this in too. I dry brush my shades. I think it was 26 years ago I started doing, 26 or 27 years ago, I started doing dry brushing. Now everybody does it. But I remember discussing this with someone who was doing all the difficult floats. And I said, I think dry brushing would work a lot better. And I was told, oh no, the students would never be able to comprehend what to do with a dry brush. And that's just to add little rosy cheeks. And I'm like, well, we'll see. And what I learned is I can so easily go in and picked up a little bit of water there. I can go into these little areas and pull them down by dry brushing them. Now you can also float those in. You could do what's called a tornado float or a cone-shaped float. So much easier to just dry brush this in and soften it. And just like the highlights need to have different lengths and different values, you need to also do the same with the shades. Okay, and then I want to also go in and put in just a little bit of shades here. Now, I'm along an edge, so I can still dry brush in and just maybe a little bit of a shade here. Now, it's got the same shade there. So again, what I would be doing is making it blend right into that. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard the term lost and found edges. A lot of times when you're painting a flower, that will make it look really soft when it's not really obvious where a shade starts and stops, and it just kind of looks like it molds right into what's underneath it. You can always come back in and separate it. Oh, this graphite. Sorry, girls. My graphite is really getting in the way here. Okay, so now I want to talk about going into, I've got one shade and the base coat color and one highlight. Now let's go into some darker darks and some lighter lights. And I'm going to just, I've got my floating brush right here. Now, did you see how that darkened up once it dried? You can see these shades really well now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little bit more choosy now, and I'm going to come in and I'll still walk that out. You guys are going to like it so much better once I do that. So that's a little bit deeper there, but I'm not going to follow the whole edge now. And again, I'm talking in general. Generally, when I'm painting a realistic flower, I'm looking at a photograph and I'm recording the values, what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm painting. I make sure I maintain a certain light source. And so if I have an upper right-hand light source, it's very important to make sure you keep that consistent. Okay, so now as I come down here, that's coming out a little bit far. So this shade is not going to be as dark as this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this up and I want to make sure I start thin and I get a little bit thick. And maybe I'll go behind here and then I'll stop. I'll pick it up over here. So you see the brush control you have to have when you're painting something realistically. This is so different than what so many of you have been taught. Because other people, other artists would just say, well, just follow that line, really nice. And let's go into Rockwood red. Well, that would show and it would work. but it wouldn't be as soft and as delicate. And that's what the biggest message I'm trying to convey. Okay, so now right here, these two values were together. I'm going to come in. This is really wide. And we're just bringing in it. And then I use my brush to soften it away. That would be where you would use a mouth brush. Sorry, I keep going off. So now I've got that first shade here. I've got a mid-tone and I've got the highlight. That's rolling over like a cylinder. So again, it would be like this part of the cylinder right here. That's what you would be seeing right there. So there are times you could use a mop, and like when you're ending your float, if it's not nice and soft and it doesn't blend away, that is very important. So now over here, I'm thinking, excuse me, I would really like to have that roll back a little bit more. Well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to say you should be rolling back a little bit more? I'm going to go into that highlight, excuse me, into that shade. But I'm not going to do it all over. A lot of times my instructions will say you're covering a smaller area than the first. And I also don't just do one application of each color. Like the first shade I put in, sometimes I'll apply that 3 times because I do the acrylic layering technique. And I start out very, very subtly. Let's start over here. Now, I don't like this harshness right here. So what are we going to do about that? Let's zoom in. Okay, what I'm saying is, I don't like this area right here. That's a value jump because I eliminated the mid-tone. Sometimes you guys will be painting on your own and you'll go, man, I really don't like that. I don't know why, but I don't like that. Well, it could very well be that you eliminated your mid-tone. So watch what happens when I've got my dry brush. We're going to just put our mid-tone right back in. I need a little bit more paint. It's starting to dry on me, girls. Here. See how you can't see it now? It just looks like it goes from one value to the other one, and it's just blended beautifully. I also have a little bit of a line here. And so I can do the same thing. I can take my base coat color and just soften that a little bit. So it looks like it's nice and light, nice and blended. Okay, now we need a little bit more highlights in there too. And again, I'm only showing you one shade and one application of the shade color. Let me show you what happens when I build it up. So I'm going to take my second shade again. Because when you're floating, it really becomes a very semi-transparent color. So every time I put in an application of paint, it becomes a little bit more smooth and a little bit more even. When you're walking out of float, if you have a hard time walking out of float, you could dry brush it and then walk over it. And it's going to make you look like you're a master floater. So now let's go in and we're going to add a 5th value and we're going to dry brush again. And this is why I get so many brushes in my water.
Can you pull the paper down just a little bit, Debbie?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm looking for a smaller dry brush. Okay, so I'm going to go into pink chiffon now all by itself. So I'm covering a smaller area. That means I'm not covering as wide of an area, nor am I going to cover as long of an area. So as it comes in here, it's kind of like sinking in. I'm not going to really give that the second highlight. We're going to just leave that the first one. And I'll come over here. And this is, I'm going to turn it around. Sorry, guys. Hope I'm not making you sick. Very important to have variation in them. I just do the same with that. Now, as I'm dry brushing, I dry brush fairly fast. Your speed might be a little bit slower than me. What's important is that you're creating a value on a flower. You don't want to go, oh, look at the highlight on that flower. You want to say, oh, look at the nice form of the flower. And you don't, they all kind of blend together to create the form. But what I don't like is I keep losing the mid-tone here, which is really easy to do because these are such small areas. I'm going to go back and put that in. Okay, so now I want to reinforce the some of the ripples that I put in. And these were such small floats. Sometimes it's impossible to add, make them smaller. Sometimes I just will add variation by only coming back with the second color to a few of them. And then that way, some look a little brighter than others. What I like to do though, when I'm done dry brushing, like what I'll do here is I'll take and chisel pull. Am I on camera? No. I'm going to chisel pull. And see how that just really curved that around. And I'll do the same thing down over here. Again, I just kind of made this up looking so it looks somewhat like the Irish. And that's why I use graphite on it. So now over here, what we could do is let's go back into our first highlight color, the color we mixed. We could then say that this is all coming together. And see how then this is brighter than this. So it's bringing it forward. And yes, I've already shaded there. And that happens a lot where I'll put, I'll just want to convince the eye that this is curving around. And many times I will put a highlight right over an area where I've already shaded. But what's really important is that it blends away. And you could also even, it's almost like using a liner brush, only I'm using my brush to float. And that was just to create that edge to bring it around. So again, then over here, this isn't looking like much of anything. And again, the line is there, but we can go in. Let's put a little bit of shading here. Now I'm not dry brushing this time. I'm showing you how to. I'm showing you how, oh, you know what it is. I zoomed in. That's why I keep coming off camera. I'm showing you how to do a back-to-back float. And this is a tornado float. So I'm going to make it a little bit darker, do it off to the side. So if this is the area I just did, what I would do is pull this down, walking it out on a triangle, flip my brush over, walk it out, and bring it down. That's what I just did there to make it shaded, and it looks like it's concaving there. I'll do it again with bubblegum pink. And so like right here, this would be shaded because it's going out. So I'm going to go in there and then I'm going to just bring this in a little bit. But again, it's a cone shape, but it's rounded. But when I look at the cone and I look at that, it's the same. Oh, there's the cone. Yes, I will add a darker dark in the middle of it to make it even smaller. But then right here, I'll pull just a little bit. Let me go a little bit darker so you can see that really well. I just pull a little bit of dark there. And then I'll also come back. I just flip my brush and I'm coming back over here. So you can see how these are just little building blocks. Let's see if this is, no, that's not dry yet. We'll come in and put a little bit more highlight right here. This needs to be broken up. So this time, I'm going to cover a much smaller area. And where that was really harsh and one long line, do you see now? How just by coming in with a little bit brighter color, how I broke that up. And it's making it fold a little bit more. Very, 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 very subtle values. This looks very messy because of all the graphite lines. I'm sorry, girls. But it's the overall concept that I'm really wanting to drive home. Now over here, I kind of like that that's just one value and we have two values there. So I'll just leave that. And that's what makes the subtleties so interesting on creating these folds. So again, let me find the original. You can see how I came in right here with a nice dark, and again, this is printed. So some of the subtleties, like there is a value, a shade value right there, rolling that back. There's a darker value there. Over here, you can see how the darkest dark is right there. And right here, it's controlled where there's just deep darks because that's what's underneath there. But look how light everything else is. But yet you can see that it's rolling and curving.
Do you use anything in your floats, Deb, to extend them, you know, like floating gel or?
Nope. My medium is water. I love water. There's no need to. If you're going to use dry brushing and you're going to be floating, there's no need to use that. I get in and I get out. I like painting fast. And so there's absolutely no need to do that. What's important is, and you know, the other thing too, and let me come back on. Okay, so what I want to say, I'll put my other glasses on because I'm looking at my computer now, is when you are floating, if you're using subtle value changes, then you really only need water and you can dry brush and it makes it very easy. When I find that you are blending colors together and people are value jumping, and most people value jump because most teachers value jump because they want to get things done. Pressure to get things done very quickly is very important now because everybody wants a 4-hour class or less. That's when you need something, a medium, so that you can blend two colors together. And I didn't do any blending today because I wanted to show you how to use the acrylic layering technique, and I wanted to keep this all within an hour. I knew that my instructions are calling for oil paints in that 1 packet. And that's what I wanted to show you, the colors and the techniques that are used here with acrylic layering. There's also another technique where you can blend with acrylics. And perhaps on another lesson, I will show you that. I know that I do have videos on my YouTube channel showing you how to blend with acrylics. Do we have any other questions?
I don't think there was. I was kind of asking as you went along, and also by the time people ask something, you would answer it because they're a bit of a delay, right? So yeah, so
Perfect. So, well, I hope that you've enjoyed this. What I'm trying to do is, I was telling Debbie ahead of before we started, and let me bring her on, that when I first started painting, this is like 30 years ago, decorative painting, there was a lot of oil painters and not very many people painting in acrylics realistically. I learned how to paint in oils, and I had little kids, and I told the story in a classroom about how my son took his truck in the purple and it was all over my floor. So I decided I needed to paint in acrylics, but I wanted to paint realistically. So over the years, we've lost a lot of our oil painters. People have come into acrylics, and I was saying that there's a lot of pressure to finish a project in 4 hours and get it done. And so stylizing came about. So not as many people paint realistically anymore. It's more like a whimsical realism. And so that you can get it done really quick and really easy. And I want to introduce you a little bit more to the things that I've learned over the years so that you can understand what you don't have to be afraid to mix. I was showing you why sometimes you have to mix and why the bottled acrylics won't work. But you can paint realistically with acrylics. It's just a couple more steps. And what techniques did I use? I used floating and I used dry brushing. What made the difference is the placement and the placement of where you're putting these values. And that's really key. And so if you learn to just start looking around your house, see if you can find some of the forms. Like what's really obvious is, like I said, the bottle of paint was a cylinder. Look for little subtle things, the subtle forms, look for spheres, a circle in 3 dimensions is a sphere, like a ball, and a cube is a box. Anything that is a rectangle that becomes dimensional, it becomes a cube. So look for those shapes and just start making some visual observations, and that's going to help you a lot, especially when you start painting more realistically. So I hope that this was worth your time. I hope you enjoyed the class, and we will see you next week for some more amazing lessons from our wonderful artists here at Creative Innovations. Have a good night, everyone.